and serves as in-house counsel to a family wealth office where he has overseen over $500 million in wealth transfers since 2007. In 2011, Jonathan launched Planned Giving Advisors, where he provides consulting services to nonprofit planned giving programs while continuing his work at the Family Wealth Office. He's also the author of the Planned Giving blog, which provides news and commentary on the field of planned giving with over 1,700 subscribers and 175,000 visitors since its launch in 2010. During this presentation, Jonathan welcomes your questions, and what we're encouraging you to do is put questions you may have in the chat throughout the presentation, and I will be keeping an eye on them and sharing them with Jonathan as we go. And there will also be a Q&A at the end, again, via chat. So you're welcome to ask all your questions today. And also when we finish, please feel free to send emails to info@circle.org, and our staff will coordinate with Jonathan to get you the answers. So without further ado, welcome, Jonathan, and start sharing with us the important things we need to know by the end of the year.
Okay, thank you, Anne. Okay, before I start this presentation, I want to sort of put a preface is that I'm not selling any investment advisory services. This is good news. In fact, my background, which Anne just went over, I'm more of an attorney, estate planning attorney, working with a high net wealth family wealth office, also working just individuals. And actually, I'm going to use during this presentation not the family wealth office work, more my mom. I'm going to keep that as my sort of model. And what I've done here is that this coming into the fall, looking at what should be the topic for this year's presentation, I realized that people's investments, their retirement investments, have really suffered the last year or two. And I felt, it's time for me to finally venture into talking about some of the principles of investments and retirement. So I'm not here to tell you how to invest. What I'm going to do is cover some principles that come from JP Morgan, Bank of America, big places. But I'm also just going to try to comment on what I feel is realistic. And then I'm going to throw in there, obviously, on the estate planning side and personal planning side, some advice too, in terms of things you shouldn't be forgetting, whether it's end of the year or with any time during the year. But so I said, this is about, this year end. I think that's the big topic. There's no new tax laws on the horizon, not for a couple of years. And so let's get into it again. So, okay, thank you, Anne, again for the introduction. Okay, so we're going to cover a couple sections here. I'm going to try to go slowly. Some of the stuff is a little complicated, but I'm going to try to sort of pick out what I feel is the most important ideas. Of course, feel free to send a chat, a question through the chat. We will take a look at that, or Anne will alert me, and I'll try to stop and answer the question. Additionally, at the end, we're going to open up for some conversation. At that point, you can sort of, if you have a question, you can unmute yourself. Okay, so anyway, so it's funny. This is the first time I've given this particular presentation, and I'm actually pretty excited about it. And I started off with, I had found some different presentations from JP Morgan, and talking about 8 principles for successful retirement. And then I found 7. I finally, I'm going to stick with 6. Now, these are not exclusive. There's a lot of different principles out there, a lot of different. What my goal here is just, again, present some of these ideas, try to give you some practical points. Some of the ideas seem a little heavy, and so how's that? How am I going to have 10 times my current income for retirement? Things like that. But hopefully you'll come away with this. You'll pick up some ideas. You have a chance to ask some questions, and so it's again, I'm not selling to you. I think it's important to know that. Okay, and then of course, I'm actually this is a big deal for me to step into the realm of retirement investing, and what I'm looking for is, again, best practices. Again, I'm not going to tell you how, but I'm going to show you my mom's retirement account, what's going on with it, and this will sort of give you an idea of what a basic retirement plan might look like if you have thinking about adjusting your own. This should help you, and of course, so that's when I say recommended and sample asset allocation. That's my mom's account. So I'll show you when I get there. I'll tell you. But we're going to finish up. We'll talk about some real steps in terms of ensuring your legacy. I mean, ensuring your plans come to fruition, and different planning things you should be taking care of. This time of the year is a good time as of any to look into them. Okay, so I'll just here are the 6 principles. I had to do a couple other principles. I said, you know what, let me just try to keep it simple. We'll talk firstly a little about, what you can, focus on what you can control, plan for what you can't. Okay. Or create the plan, you need for retirement, meaning, how much money you need. That's kind of important, how much money you're going to live off of. Plan for a longer life. Again, I have separate slides on these different points. This is the summary of them. Prioritizing the goals and using time to advantage, dynamically investing, meaning changing your investments over time, just to make sure that it's on the right path, being willing to make changes. But of course, there's a caveat to that also. And lastly, and actually this point, I decided not to have a separate slide on, and this is obvious, but it goes without saying, but of course you have to say it. You don't want to overspend and you don't want to invest too conservatively. So there are different aspects that could really affect your retirement. Obviously, not saving enough and spending too much puts you not in a great position. And then believe it or not, investing too conservatively, which we will show you throughout here, you'll see a couple of issues that come up in terms of leaving funds and rolling CDs, things like that. You're even though you're making a little bit, you're actually losing money over time, especially currently with inflation. But again, you have to balance your desire to want to make more money with the risks that come with it too. So, and that's important to balance depending on your age. Okay, so I thought this was a very interesting. This all comes from JP Morgan. They've got a bunch of different slides here. And so, so what can you control? Well, I just mentioned saving and spending. That's clear. And that's pretty obvious. And the asset allocations, I think I want to put it out here. I have my second example is my mother-in-law. So I have my mom. We'll talk about that in a second. And my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law financially they were actually had a business. They're in Scranton. They very, very well plumbing contracting business, but the business eventually went down, and they don't have a lot at this point for retirement. They're sort of just getting by. And then anytime my mother-in-law comes to me and says, she wants me to actually take over investing of her retirement assets, and I really don't want to do that. But I think maybe after I've done this presentation, maybe I'll take a little more active role. There's really not a lot there. But she said to me recently, so there's a certain stock that's going public. Should I buy it? I'm thinking, like, you have less than $100,000. You have around $100,000 of retirement assets. You should, if you have less than $1 million, in my opinion, you should probably not be looking at any individual stocks. And we'll show you when I talk about investment portfolios and allocations, we're talking mutual funds. And we're talking about, so mutual funds are diversified, and then picking multiple mutual funds have further diversification. But individuals and purchasing stock, I know there's a lot of people have done this over years. You got a good tip, you buy a stock, maybe you win, maybe you lose. Certain stocks, more like utility stocks, as people on the call know, were great in terms of dividends and slow long-term growth. But generally speaking, if you're looking at your retirement assets stuff, you've got to come with an asset allocation, and that does not include gambling on individual stocks. And I joke around when I hear people who are talking about in their retirement already and talking about, well, I want to buy a certain stock, maybe that might be good for my retirement accounts. I was like, that's outside your retirement accounts. There's a rule when you go to a casino, that's money you're willing to lose. So there's something to be said that investing in the stock market can be that dangerous. Of course, there are certain stocks, major companies, which many of you may have significant holdings in and done very well. So I'm not against that necessarily, but particularly if your assets aren't so high, individual, you asset allocation, mutual funds, things that are diversified as opposed to individual stocks, which can go down. Now, of course, what's out of your control? Of course, market returns. And no matter what somebody shows you, no matter what somebody tells you, again, you can never rely upon past performance. So actually, that's really a challenge, because everything is, well, how do I now analyze it? And I'm going to show you, well, the performance last 5, 10, 15, 20 years, 50 years looks pretty good. But again, nobody can guarantee you future performance based on past performance. Now, what you can do is hopefully it's diversified enough. I hope you apply some of these principles that we're talking about so that you can come up with an intelligent and risk-averse approach. And of course, you can't control policy, tax policy, say, regarding different things like that, policy stuff, that's out of your control. But also you have some control, and I want to mention it here, retirement timing. My mom in particular, I think I want to tell you a little about my mom, so this will help us sort of give us a good context. My mom did not have a great career. She started off as a teacher, went to City College. Probably people on this call probably did the same thing. She wasn't cut out for teaching, and maybe it wasn't until she was around early 50s did she finally find a sort of a career. She ended up as a career counselor. Ironically enough, she became a career counselor. She had a degree in counseling, a master's in counseling. And so she became a career counselor, and she worked for a government agency. And even there, how's she going to build a retirement? My parents got divorced. Actually, they separated, when I was 13. So, she had to try to earn stuff on her own. And she was able to, in terms of retirement time, she worked until her early 70s. She really, and basically what she did was she maximized her Social Security. And during her working years, she had a good 20 years career-wise, which came sort of you would think maybe at the end of her work life, but what she was able to do is she maximized any contributions that she could put into the 403B. That's the type of retirement plan that she had at her job. And she had the good fortune that the 403B plan administrators had pretty good investment options. So I never was involved in that. And so for her 20-something years, around 20 years as a career counselor, working for a state agency in New Jersey, she was able to put away a couple $100,000 in retirement assets, a 403B type accounts. And so she maxed out there. So number one, she maxed out how long she can work so she could get the highest Social Security. Number two, she maxed out whatever contributions she could make, with that they would match whatever she could put into it. She did, and even before that, she had IRAs that she had also given the max that she could when she was able to the max. She was able to, whatever they were allowed her to put in. So she ends up now with about 300 to 350,000, I'd say, in different retirement assets, and so that's something she has some timing over in terms of when you retire, maximizing Social Security. And longevity, of course, well, some control means that, try to live a healthy life, but that, that's best you can do on that end. Okay, so hold on, whoops, skip the slide. Okay, so whatever the retirement that you want. Hold on one second. I want to just having trouble seeing. Okay, so how much money do you need for your retirement? Now, this slide kind of throws me off a little bit. I myself am turning 55. I'm 54, and this is telling me that I need quite a bit in savings. Now, what they're suggesting here is that, again, we'll talk about practically speaking. This is sort of theoretical. This is from Bank of America. They're saying, well, you're looking to create enough of a corpus in your retirement accounts to be able to get 38% of income replacement from your retirement savings. So if I can get, let's say I have let's say I need $100,000 a year in my retirement, 38% of that should be coming from my retirement accounts, which should be a couple $1 million. I'm not going to admit where I'm at in my retirement accounts. Yeah, I'll tell you what to do, but I'm not going to tell you what I'm doing because it's my circumstances haven't allowed me to do that. I think more practically speaking is obviously, these things are great ideas, but you don't always have the control over this. What you do have control over in terms of how many multiples of your current earnings. So what they're suggesting is, you've got to have these multiples of your earnings, your salary times their current salary. So, we're talking, they're asking me, well, yeah, you should, at this point, you're 55, you should already have over $1 million set aside for retirement. And obviously that's not the case. I think practically speaking, what I mentioned already, what my mom did was she maximized wherever she could. And she's a very big saver, and she's 82. 83. Oh, wow. She's 83. And she's still, she's still saving. She's still, well, she is spending part of her retirement. So her retirement income is coming out, she's got her Social Security, around 2,000 a month or something. And she's making up the rest, probably another 2,000 to 3,000 a month from IRA withdrawals, retirement plan withdrawals, which is basically required in distributions. And sometimes she takes a little more from that. And of course, she has some money, cash set aside in a checking account. And then what I'll show you towards the end of the presentation is she sold the house. So when her parents got divorced, my mom got the house, and the house went up in value. And then the house is the sort of longer term assets that we set aside for her if she ever needs it, but she's investing it a little more broadly, which we'll talk about in the later half of the presentation. Okay, so one of the ideas that came out here, and there were a couple different versions of this slide, but I thought it was very interesting. And again, there's one of them. Let me tell you what you're looking at here. You have to plan for a long life. People are living longer. Listen, look at this. If you're 65 today, let's say it's a husband and wife, the chance of one of you making it to 75 is 99%. That's very high. Chance of one of you making it to 80 is also pretty high, 96%. The chance of one of you making it to 85, 88%, that's pretty high. That's pretty high numbers. And even to 90, 69%. And again, there were a couple of different versions of this. I didn't know what, depending on which life chart they're looking at. But in fact, this one here, that there's a 15% chance somebody will make it to 100, still pretty high. So what I guess the purpose of just showing you this is that don't be surprised if you're in your 60s right now. You do need to plan for a good 30 years, if possible, of retirement assets. And it's not so simple, and something you really won't know. I will mention about, what if you run out of money? How do you plan in that circumstance? I have a bullet point coming up on that. So this is just something to keep in mind. Okay, so what this slide is, hold on. So I'm having a problem here in terms of how I'm not seeing the titles on top. But hold on one second. Hold on one second. Sorry to jump out.
Okay. Maybe it's a good moment for me to just say if you have questions. And Jonathan, I can read the top slides.
No, I have them printed out. I just didn't, because I get blocked by the chat thing.
Got it.
Okay, so hold on one second. I just want to be able to see the title, which is always helpful. Okay, so I'm good now. Okay, right. So this was about prioritizing your goals, and this is really what this is kind of complex. So I did talk about short-term goals. Okay, you need a certain amount of cash. Well, my mom's got she got probably $75,000 in a checking account, just sitting there just in case she needs it. She won't touch that money if she doesn't have to. But if she has something with her teeth or some other medical thing, something that comes out, she will use it. Then they talk about midterm goals. So what they're showing here is that, depending on how long-term goals, how much should be a sort of mix between equities, which is the blue, and bonds, which is the gray. And we'll get a little more specific in a couple of slides about these different potential portfolios. Again, I'm just using standards out there. Then there's long-term, and it goes legacy goals. What they're saying is, if you're looking at 30 years, so if you have a pool of funds, and in case my mom's case, the money from the sale of the house, which she doesn't intend to actually use, and we actually put that in a irrevocable trust. And I'm gonna just describe that to you. I'm a lawyer, so I do trust planning, and so instead of putting the money in her name upon the sale of her house, we put it in a trust. We named the trust Madeline Gudema Irrevocable Trust. And how we set it up was that this money's for her, but basically it's really out of her name, out of her control. My sister and I are the trustees of it. We invested for her. My sister, my brother, and I are the beneficiaries, but we have the flexibility to use it for her. The reason we did this is, if after 5 years, there's a 5-year look back period for Medicaid. In case God forbid she has to go to a nursing home and she ends up spending all her assets, if it's been in this trust for more than 5 years, it won't be used for Medicaid purposes. It won't hurt her for Medicaid purposes. And so with that one, we're doing a little more long-term investing on. But again, I'll show you what's happening with that, which is why I gave this presentation today. But what I want to point out to you is that and this is where you have to start thinking about in terms of your risk, tolerance for risk. I mean, it is painful when you see your account, it's gone. I'll show you later, my mom's account, or that money we sold her house for, it's down about 14% for the year. You'll see how we got there. You say, well, that's not bad, because the stock market is down 25%, S&P 500. But still pretty shocking. What I want to point out to you here is that what they show here is the range from the different blends, or either stock or blend or bonds. The bonds is the gray, equities is the blue, and purple is the 50 this is just, let's say, a 50-50 breakdown. But you see, within 1 year, it can be a pretty high swing. And this is just looking between 1950 and 2018. So there's a wide range of time period. You could have had as high as a 47% year, as low as a 39% year. And obviously that's not acceptable for a lot of people. But if you're looking at 5 years, then you're looking at a high of 28%, a low of -3. You're looking at 10 years, again, you could have had a -1%, but it could be as high as 19%, just looking at the stock. And 20 years, as high as 17, low 6%. Now, of course, my mom's account is being invested, she's 83, so we're not investing it, 30 years out. But we're trying to maximize it in using relatively conservative approach. So we'll talk about it. So one idea to take away from the slide, again, this is a little complex. I don't want to go more into details because I don't want to confuse myself or you. It's a good idea to sort of have buckets. So for my mom, there are 3 buckets: bucket cash in the stock account, bucket retirement account, which supplements her current income. She required minimum distributions in, and I encourage her to pull more money out, even though sometimes just if you pull money out of your IRA or other retirement accounts, you got to pay tax on it. I say, yeah, but use it. If your tax bracket's not that high. Her total earnings around on her tax return is around 50,000. So she can afford to take an extra 10,000 out if she wants. And then we have the third bucket, which is longer term, but just not that 30-year long term, but a longer term conservative approach that if she really has the need and starts spending through her funds, she will have this extra pool. Hopefully we'll get long-term growth in the stock market. Again, hopefully, because I will show you in a couple minutes what's happening with that account. And then one of the reasons why I said, let's do this presentation. Okay, so hold on one second. I dropped out a couple of slides. All right. So the idea of this slide here, what the point of this slide is that, and again, I don't want to get too bogged down in details on the slide. What they're suggesting is, again, this is JP Morgan, and they have a bunch of different types of presentations just like this. What they're trying to say is you've got to adapt over time. You can't, it's not a great idea but ultimately one of the pieces of advice I'm going to give you is that you've got to try to find an investment advisor that you feel comfortable with, that you'll meet with at least annually to go over how things are moving. Are you too heavy in income? Somebody got okay, thank you. So, and when it says dynamic, I mean, it means say like, don't put it in one thing and leave it for 20, 30 years. Take a look at it regularly. You got to get a good investment advisor. That's really one of my takeaways, is that we've got to find the right guy. And I will show you what we do have somebody investing my mom's money. It's a Fidelity advisor. And I'm not so sure. I'm that happy with what they're doing there, but I'll show it to you when I get to it. So I limited to the sort of 6 principles that JP Morgan is putting out there. What are my takeaways? And again, more practical stuff that I've already started to talk about. All right, the bottom line is this: anybody younger on the call, the earlier you start saving, the better. And I mentioned this already, but I want to just say, never think it's too late to start saving. And my mom, again, she really struggled with her career. She really had no retirement plan of her own, except for her ex-husband. She would get the benefit of his Social Security at some point. But instead, she, in her 50s, ended up finding a consistent job, and she ended up, actually, it's a major part of her retirement income. So never too late. So if you're even your 50s, even early 60s, you can start saving. By the way, the law in terms of adding money to your IRA, it used to be once you hit 70 and a half, you could no longer add to your IRA, and that's no longer the case. So if you're working past age 70 and a half, you are able to contribute to your IRA. Again, it's only to extent you have earned income, you can make gifts up to that level. And the maximum, I think, is 6,000 per year. Okay, so that's one takeaway. Number two, invest for the long run. So, and I've been warned, don't look at your investment accounts. Stay away from get rich quick ideas. One of my things I fell prey to myself. I'm not a great investor. I'm just admitting it. Is that I work for a company that's publicly traded stock, and I'm involved in moving shares, big shares. Oh, this company that they basically control will move a bunch of stock, try to take advantage of growth that's going to happen with that stock. So I feel like I have a little insider information, but I actually don't have any insider. I'm not a real insider trader because I really know nothing. And so, for example, two of the companies, I saw the stock was shooting up. We made a couple $1 billion. So I said, why don't I just invest in some of their things? They seem to have a good handle on stuff, and they'll get rich quick ideas, and they both have. One of the stocks I invested in, I put my retirement accounts into one of their companies because there was something coming out. It would have gone up by 100 times. It would shot up very high. And someone said to me, you better at least sell what you invested in at that point. And I said, no, I'll let it all ride. Like when you're at a casino, you're feeling good, you let it ride. Well, it didn't work. And it went down from 50 something dollars a share to $1 a share. So, and the same thing with another company, which was, they were doing not a public offering, but a capital raise, and they're raising a bunch of money. And I said, okay, maybe it's a good time, I'll buy in. And yeah, it went down. It got listed at $4 a share. It's like, this is great. Now it's down to $1 a share. So invest for the long run. That, particularly your retirement assets, when you're thinking about it, if you want to play the market, set aside money. That could be fun, but that's not a great idea if you're thinking about what you might need to live on in 30 years from now. A good idea, and again, one of the takeaways I hope will be is keeping track of your not just your net worth, but just everything you've got. That's one of the other bullet points that's going to come up. Keeping track of your net worth, and that goes hand in hand with having a good investment advisor and meeting. At least I'd say annually is a good idea, just to sort of see how things are doing and sort of keep track of, are you on track for retirement? Could you make adjustments? Maybe you have to change your living situation. Maybe you have to make, maybe you still have to continue to work a little longer. Maybe you have to continue adding to your retirement plan. You want to sort of get a good picture of where you're going. Maximize Social Security, I mentioned already, but I thought that was my mom really did a great job on that. She worked, I think maybe she was working full time until maybe she's 71 or 72, whatever. She hit to the point where she knew like she was actually got the maximum, and she got not only the maximum in Social Security, but she got the maximum ability to add to retirement through those years also. So she, even though she started late, she ended up doing fairly well with it. And like I said, the investment of the 403b account that she had was very good, very diversified. They have good advisors. I have nothing to do with it. And then now what about the possibility, and this is something else I deal with as an attorney. I'm still practicing attorney. I don't have a law firm, but I do some consultations with individuals. Well, what if you're going to run out of money? Well, the possibility that you might run out of money. This is more likely my mother-in-law's situation. And I've said to them, well, you own a cottage in Pennsylvania. It's got some value. If you value it for the family purposes, put it out of your name. Just put it in your children's name. Put it in for my mom. She sold her house. And this was a little late. For both my grandparents, both our grandparents are immigrants, one from Poland, one from Hungary, grandmothers. And very early, they're by the early 70s, they had basically moved. They didn't have very much anyway. Whatever they had, they put it in either my dad's name or for his mom, or my mom's name for her mom. And at some point, if they needed Medicaid, they did go on Medicaid. Neither of them spent much time in a nursing home. There wasn't that type of situation. My grandmother on my mother's side lived to 100. She did spend a couple months, like 2 months in a nursing home before she passed away at, 99 and a half. But it was a good idea to, and obviously whatever money she had, my mom used it to take care of her mom and make sure she had a good health. But there was she did have the benefit of she didn't have to do a spend down. Let's put it that way. And again, try to find a financial professional who can find a balance between, safe investing, keeping it conservative, but also trying to get some long-term upside. Again, I don't have the secret to that, to tell you the truth.
Jonathan, it's interesting. We just have some comments about listening to the wisdom of your investment advisor. The group is interpreting what you're saying as, it's not terrible to invest in stocks, but not for your retirement savings.
For sure.
Stock funds or where your retirement savings should be. But yeah, I don't know if you're going to give it any advice as to how to find an investment advisor you can.
So I'll tell you what my advice is, but I'll get to that in a second. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it is very tricky, and I'll show you what this advisor we use. Both my parents happen to use the same advisor, and again, I have some of my questions after really looking closely at the account for this presentation. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what's called best practices. I should put that in quotes because is it really the best practice? I can't guarantee that, but these seem to be very, very prudent practices. Things that you should do something like this. Hold on one second. Okay, so I pulled in again 10 golden rules. Again, this stuff you can find different articles make these things. Okay, so these are the quote golden rules of investors for investors. All right, have goals, great, easy. But bigger potential returns, bigger risk. And of course, diversification, very important. Don't put everything in one basket. Invest for the long term. Okay, we're going to talk about that. We already mentioned that. We have some. I'll show you how to do that. If it's too good to be true, it is too good to be true. So any quick get rich schemes, you put in this, it's going to shoot up. You are risking that you lose 100% of it. That's my advice. I don't know what it is, but I tell you, if it's that quick, it's not likely to pan out, or definitely risky. Never invest in anything you don't understand. That's interesting, because a lot of stuff I myself as an attorney, but now really in the financial, working with a family on a major financial situation here, a couple $2 billion. There's a lot of things out there I don't understand. So we got to keep trying to educate ourselves to try to understand what is happening, those investments, what's actually being done. Charges, okay, so fine, you have to be a little careful in terms of what you're paying. So for example, the only example I can have pop into my head is people ask me quite often, what about commercial annuities? So the big knock on commercial annuities actually can be a good idea. So what I want to, like I mentioned, you have a couple pools. You've got cash because you need it. You got your income producing stuff, which is your Social Security and from your IRAs, and maybe you buy a commercial annuity. But just remember, commercial annuities, there's a charge for it, so it's not free. So you have to balance that. And again, that's where you can get very tricky, and you really got to find people you trust. That's where a good financial advisor to help you pick the right annuities, because some of these annuities have big upfront fees or fees to get out of them. So you have to understand that. We're not going to talk about annuities today because we talked about them last time. Reinvesting income, of course, that was the standard. That was good advice. If you had a utility stock, there were dividends, you just reinvested it. So you just thought long-term growth, very, very nice idea. Did not try to time the market. This is another, and truth, something you have no choice. You sold a piece of real estate, you sold a house or something. One of my other clients, also similar situation to my mom. They came into a pretty significant amount of money, and we tried to find, and again, a longer term investment pool. It dropped down quite a bit in the first year or two, because we're right now, it's a pretty tough time. So we weren't trying to time the market, just when we got in the market. And what they keep telling me is that you got to give it time. So if you've got the right principles going here, you feel there's solid principles in terms of you're doing the right thing, you have the right diversification, you just got to give it time. And it's hard to do. First, review your portfolio, we mentioned already. Okay, so so of course, this is the argument that you should be investing in the stock market. You don't want to miss out on some of this. But again, we've got to figure out how much there's risk. Again, the point here, okay, well, if you invested, was it $100? Yeah, took $100, put it in the S&P 500 index fund, if there was such a thing, for 50 years. it would turn into 10,000. Now, if you had left it in treasury bonds, again, the average treasury rates there, you'd only end up at 2,400. 3-month treasury short-term things would have even less, would have literally only $100 would only turn into $900. So, all right, so we know now that it is a good idea to try to get some potential growth out of the stock market. Again, with the caveats I've given you already. Now we're getting to a little more specifics. This is not my mom's account. This was from Schwab, but my mom's accounts are very similar to this. My mom is more, she's got 30% of the account that we created for her, again, with the sale of the house. So that, again, we're not likely she'll need that fund. So that's why we sort of separated out from our other funds. And so 30%, the darkest of 30, so very conservative, it goes down to even 20% stocks and 50% bonds and 30% cash. She's more on the sort of moderately conservative. I'll show you her breakdown. But so number one thing you need to think about is how much will be sort of stock market. Again, there's different types of funds within a stock, different sectors and different approaches within the stock market. So what percentage will be on that little bit of our riskier side, but also has a growth potential? How much will be more on the sort of bonds and sort of fixed income type stuff, which is still could lose money on that, but at least it's got a bit less risky, and the fluctuations are much more manageable. All right, so and what this does, the exact same breakdown, saying, again, this is just suggesting this. Again, I'm not telling you what you should or shouldn't do, but this is just some ideas here. If you follow that moderate pool, presuming age 60 to 69, this was the best year was 30%, up 31%. The worst year, down 21%. So again, let me pop back to what moderate was 60% stock, 35% bonds. So you see that you could still have some pretty significant fluctuation. And again, my mom just saw a pretty significant drop in her accounts, and hers is actually models what the moderately conservative is she's just had the worst year, and she's down 14%. So there you go. This chart, which was done before this year, shows you what really could happen. Now, the good news is I'm feeling, okay, wait a second. On the best years, she could be up 27%. Okay, that's pretty good news if that ever happens, if she stays in long enough. But on average, if she could pull off the average annual return, she could get around 9%. That's calmed me down a little bit, just looking at this chart. Again, if you want to go very conservative, the worst year will be -5%. And the best year might be up 23%. All right, so there you see. And again, these you don't have to follow this. Again, my mom, because of the account that we're investing for her, is only part of her total assets. Again, she had the different pools I mentioned already. So we're willing to put that pool into a more of a moderately conservative approach, and that's really sort of matches what she has. And I'll show you what she's got there, and I'll show you what is bothering me about it. Okay, so and this is the breakdown of those different categories. The exact same thing, categories. There's the moderate. So now we're breaking into different versions. Again, these are not individual stocks. These are mutual funds, more like it's called index funds, sort of large cap, small cap, international. That's the three main categories, but they can be broken down to quite a bunch of different types of funds. And then bonds versus cash investments. And I'll show you in a second how her account's breaking out. All right, so here's her account. Okay, this is the asset allocation. Now I'm looking at this again. She's actually around 30% stock, so 22% domestic stock, 10% foreign stock. Again, that's going to show up in mutual funds. And this is a Fidelity investor. My father's an engineer. He's really smart. He's really detail oriented, much more than myself. And so he was already investing with this guy. Again, he's not. This is not fancy. If you've got millions of dollars, you're going to probably get a better, higher level investment advisor. But if you're talking moderate, a couple $100,000 to $1 million, you might end up with a Fidelity advisor. Not bad. But again, you got to really look at it carefully. Let me show you a little more details here. And this is the different sectors they've got. And, I'm not going to worry about so much, your allocation. This is actually right off the account of, again, this is the stock portion of that. She sold the house for $450,000. And the stock portion is at 128,000, as I did a couple weeks ago. So it might have actually gone up a little bit since then. And so you see, so not only is there that the diversification, which I already showed you, there's also sector diversification. You got information technology, financial stuff, financial sector, healthcare, consumer, discretionary, whatever that means. I don't even know what that means. Individuals. So you have these different, so you have, within the different categories of stock, you also have different sectors within them. Now, now this is what's getting me a little nervous. This is all the mutual funds that she has. And it's actually, what's bothering me about it, and here, this is the second page. So this is the total count. Now the total count at this point is about 396. It's actually maybe back up to about 400 right now. There is something that's been bothering me about this. And what's bothering me a little bit is that this is a little unwieldy to me, to tell you the truth. I wish it was more simple. I wish I could, like I said, if I go back a slide or two and I say, okay, if I decide I want a moderately conservative portfolio, I almost wish we could have, one mutual fund is large cap stocks, which is diversified, one small caps, and one, 10% internationals. I wish it was that simple, that we had like 4 groups of mutual funds, but rather they've gone this more complicated route. Now, I haven't asked them why. And some of it, what bothers me about it is, I'll show you the performance in a second. That also bothers me a little bit. But what bothers me is it's no way for me to really track what's going on, except for looking at the bottom line saying, not doing so great. So again, these are questions that I want you to think about. I want you to just sort of like, and this is something we have to ask these advisors. If someone's helping you, say, well, listen, I really can't figure this out. This looks great on paper, but the bottom line, it doesn't look so great. I'll show you some of the returns. All right, so we started out she sold her house in December 2020. So she started off with 459,000 approximately. And then we took a little time to get invested. By January 1st, 2022, it actually shot up. It was actually up really nicely right away. And then January 1st, 2022, that's where we're standing. It was basically back to even. Whatever winning she got in 2021, the first year, she kind of lost them going to 2022. And now 2022, year to date, and when I did this like two a couple weeks ago, she was down 64,000. I feel like that's a pretty big drop. That's a pretty shocking drop to me. Percentage-wise, it's only 14% down for the year. If you're looking at the SP, what bothers me also about with the Fidelity pages that I was looking at, Fidelity say, yeah, you see S&P 500 is down 20%. You're only down 14. Yeah, but the problem with that is that I really want to. They haven't been able to show me apples to apples. That's not a moderately conservative portfolio. That's just stock. So yes, of course, S&P 500 down 20%, because that's only stock. But what about all these bonds that's supposed to balance out this portfolio? So I don't have an answer. They have not given me an answer. And when I finish this presentation, I think what I'm going to do, obviously I'm finishing it now, and I'm giving this to a bunch of other clients of mine, is that I'm going to ask them. I'm going to sit down with them and say, okay, guys, you got to really explain to me. You got to show me how we're really standing up against, our stock portion of her account. How is it faring against S&P 500? Because I have a feeling they're about the same or worse than S&P 500. So in that sense, I could have just done the investing myself. So let's just see what else here. Since the original inception, of course, it's down 13.6%. Okay, S&P 500 over that time period is actually up for. So you see, we're not over that same time period. We're not beating the S&P 500. They're beating us. Dow Jones is up a lot. So again, I'm not totally upset about it, but I'm wondering about it. And this is just a picture of what's happened over time. Okay. So before I go any further, again, I really wanted to finish up on talking about, more practical legacy steps and things to think about before the end of the year. Good time to sort of reevaluate your situation. You see, it's not so simple. It's not so simple. And I came away from this creating the presentation and getting really deeper into what my mother's doing, my mother's account's doing. And I was like, I came away thinking, I'm not so sure they're doing so well. And they did not make it easy for me to figure it out. And that's Fidelity. That's got to be the easiest platform to be looking at. So I wish I had better advice for you on this, but except for to look for investment advisors who can really work this through with you and get rid of some of the complexity. I just feel like it seems too over complex. So I have a couple of takeaways before we go on this topic, but let's talk about legacy. So, let's back to earth. Okay. Legacy. So legacy planning. Really, that's really what the business I'm in. People planning the legacy. The general definition of legacy is your impact on the world. And that's something family, friends, organizationally speaking, communally speaking, pass it down. Sometimes you're talking money, sometimes property, stories, really memories, things that are important to you in life that you want to continue. You want it to be continued in your memory. Could be businesses, could be, you end with, sometimes people set up foundations to continue some charitable work, or just with the direct charity, with Worker Circle or other nonprofits that you are involved with, where their mission aligns with your mission, with your values. That's really what I try to tell people, is that if you're thinking about, of course you should give charity to as many charities as you feel comfortable, as you like. But then when you sit down to do this planning, this is really more about, real alignment of your values. And do you want to see those continued for the future? And that's really where you're starting to think about your legacy planning. And some of this, of course, you with your family, telling them, talking to them about it. But you something to think about, just sort of when you're doing your planning and organizing your estate and looking at your inventory, and I'll show you that in a second. But keep in mind that this is something that you also should be planning. You should be thinking about your legacy. So and I guess the question really is, how do you ensure that your legacy? Now, some of this is practical, because, well, first of all, you got to think about it. So you got that point, think about it. Think about, wow, what kind of legacy would I like to create? Besides family and friends and I want to add here, do what you can during your life. If you have something that really inspires you, a certain Yiddish theater, I don't know, something that's it's your thing, go ahead and think about doing it now. Don't wait till your estate. We'll talk about estates and your wills and stuff, but if you already know you want to see something really excites you, you want to spread that, you can find it, whether it's Worker Circle or other nonprofits that you're involved with, or you can get involved. Try to do it while you're alive. Why should it all be in the will? So, but getting beyond that, because people do, if you feel like you need assets, my mom, she's not going to do any of that type of stuff because she's afraid that she might run out of assets. She won't. She'll live a long life, but she won't run out of assets. But okay, that's her choice. But so practically speaking, you should have a will. Now, if you don't have a will, you should get a will. And of course, in your will, that is guiding what's going to happen to your assets after you're no longer here. Who's going to be your executor? What type of charitable gifts you might make? What type of gifts to family, friends? And you can even communicate your life's passions through what you're doing. And that's important. So having a will, very important. It's important to make sure your papers are up to date. And this is the hard. This is like a sub point of this bullet point, and can be found by trusted loved ones. So 2 points to this. Number one, wherever paperwork you've done, it's not going to mean anything if nobody can find it. This is a practical issue I've dealt with in states and trusts, is that you can do all the most beautiful plans in the world, but you've got to have somebody you trust who knows where those papers are, and can find them in case of emergency and implement your plans. So you can have a great legacy, but it can all go to waste, because at the end of the day, somebody is going to take that will and bring it to the surrogates court and submit for probate. And if it doesn't get submitted for probate, there will be an estate. They'll just divide, however the law says your estate should be divided, will be divided that way. And that's usually not necessarily your legacy. There are times when, let's say you're leaving your estate to your, let's say, children, you have 2 or 3 children, they're all going to equally, yes, that's what the New York State law, or whatever state you live in, will most likely provide for if you leave over 3 children. But that's not always the case. So you want to make sure your papers are up to date. I do see often that the papers are not updated. Wills, quite often things have changed. good idea to get a new one. It's not hard. These nowadays is very easy. Lawyers have programs because they can knock out wills very quickly. They're not very expensive. And you want to make sure that you found the right person, executors who could be your executor, who know where your documents are. And also important, choose the right people to implement your plan. And you got to tell them, you got to talk to them about it. You have to be in contact with them and say, this is what I'm planning to do. And I would like you to be my executor should something happen to me. When something, when I, it's not if, at some point in the future, it's going to happen to all of us. And so you have to find the right person. And this is not easy for some people, because I've had a lot of conversations with individuals who, through my client work, and they want to try to help out charities, and sometimes they don't have somebody to help them. They don't have, so you do have to, in addition to a financial advisor, which is very important, you do need to find sort of a, I don't know the term, a legacy implementer, somebody who you trust. It should hopefully be, if you have family, family member is usually the best, but it could sometimes families, there's conflicts there. Sometimes maybe that you've chosen not to leave the money to family, and so maybe it has to be somebody else. Sometimes you leave it with your lawyer. Good lawyers will hold on to your wills. They will take a copy of it. They'll take the original. They'll give you a copy. And but what gets me a little concerned about that is if you don't update things regularly, sometimes those law firms close down. Sometimes those lawyers pass away themselves. So every couple of years, you might need to revisit the will and find out where it is and make sure that people know where it is. Now that does ensure if a lawyer has the will and family knows the lawyer has the will, then that does ensure that the proper will get submitted. There is a note, if you've done multiple wills during your lifetime, you should know that only the will that's submitted for probate will be accepted. And if you don't tear up your old wills or cross them off, say void, you should really tear them up and throw them away once you've done a new one. Whoever comes into your house or whatever after you've passed away, relative, niece, nephew, whoever, they see a couple wills, they'll just pick and choose the one that might be best suiting to them. So that's just something I've always been concerned about. So who holds the will is always important.
Jonathan, if I could just add, when you're planning your estate, and I recently did this, and even many people are very concerned about leaving a large part of their estate to their family, and especially in our community, it's family is key. But there's a nice way you can leave a legacy to an organization. I confess I've put the Workers Circle in prominently in my will. You can put a percentage of your estate. So be it 5%, 10%. And what that means is you're giving a nice portion to the organization or the legacy you want to assist. And you're still giving the majority to your family. So I just want to encourage people, it's not one or the other. There's nice ways you can, leave a lasting legacy all around and do something that will continue beyond your lifetime. And that's something I've recently embraced, and it's it makes me feel good to know that a percentage goes here and another percentage goes to another place. And it adds up. It's very much appreciated. So I just thought, putting that in.
Thank you. That's very important. Anyway, so my last bullet point on this slide was, and this comes from my work with estates, and it's very, very important to have an inventory of all your assets and to update this regularly, and to this is both keeping track of the value, but what you have, where it's located, how to find it. And there was an unfortunate passing of an individual on one of my neighbors' father just passed away very unexpectedly, and they couldn't get into any of his computers and his accounts. So in that inventory list, you should also put your accounts and your how to passwords and things like that. This is modern world is a very strange world, and you owe it to your family to make sure that it's all in one place if at all possible. So whoever knows where your will is also knows where your inventory is, and that'll be otherwise your family could be scrambling for years to try to figure out where everything is. And quite often I've seen it, assets get lost. There's they never get claimed, and it's very hard to claim those things many years later. If you come across it, there's lost, every state has a listing, an internet listing of different assets that were given to the state to hold pending some beneficiaries claiming them. So you don't want to see that happen. So how do you fund your legacy gift in terms of nonprofits and making a gift, a plan? Well, number one, I said, set up your legacy program now. If something inspires you, talk to Ann, talk to somebody in nonprofits that you are close with, say, hey, this is an idea I'd like to implement, and do it now. So that's money, that's money you can give directly today. But in terms of your estates, your will, of course, including the charitable ideas in your will or your living trust or other testamentary idea. Testamentary gifts like your IRA, you can designate your IRA. You can do, just like you do a percentage of your residual or estate, you can do a percentage of an IRA to a charity or other retirement accounts. They're very important. And I encourage people to share with charities, with worker circles, and others, what you're doing. Sometimes you put it in your place, you put it in your will. You should share it with them. Sometimes your plans could warrant a separate agreement. I do this quite often with if it's something you want to create some sort of endowment or sponsor a program that's going to go on in the future. Maybe some of the details will be in writing. So the more you can share with them, the better they'll be able to set it up for you. And again, this gets done while you're alive. Sometimes we do this in the estates after someone's passed away. The estate works with the charity to make sure whatever the direction of the gift is to their liking. But why not do it yourself? Why leave it to your executor? Okay, so a couple last points here. I hope this has been helpful to everybody. I say use whatever you can from what you learned today. Meaning, some of the stuff is not so practical. I really just want to focus on some general ideas out there. Not saying these are absolute ideas, but if you're able to use some of the stuff today, great. Just trying to help you in terms of your planning. Find advisors who keep it simple and can stick with the market, can match the market. It's very hard. It's in fact, it's one of the hardest things is to beat the market, and everyone will tell you that. So what's better is, how about stay up with the market, meaning have a diversification like I showed you. Maybe 20 or 30% of it might be in stocks, which is a little risky, but at least it's only part of your portfolio, and at least they can keep up with the market. I don't think my Fidelity account is keeping up with the market, and if that's the case, then why do I need the Fidelity advisor? I just could put all the money in a index fund and just say, okay, I'm with the market. So if you're going to have all that diversification, all that complexity, at least it should at least be at the same level as the S&P 500. Again, just a stock portion. Again, I couldn't even figure out if they have done that or not. Be willing to make changes. Again, just review it. If you're able, once you find an advisor you feel comfortable with, you should be in touch with them annually and to go over these goals and make changes, and just go through your own legacy planning process in terms of what vision you might have for your legacy. And again, not just money wise, just family wise and message wise, and things that are important to you and your values, how you want to see those perpetuated. Okay, I think that is my last point. So let's and I've got time. I know we're kind of right at 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
I'm happy to stay on. I'm going to stop the share so you can see everybody. Anybody want, I guess if you want to ask a question, just unmute yourself. And
raise your hand. If you want to just hit the raise hand, and we'll just let you know we're recognizing you too, just in case everyone speaks up at once. Or you can put it in the chat. I know retirement's pretty complicated, so I'm guessing there's a few questions in there.
Well, number one, you're all going to get the presentation.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two is that if you have any questions, you can get to me through the staff at Worker Circle, through Melissa or Ann or anybody else at Worker Circle. I work with Worker Circle in terms of helping their Planned Giving program, and so we can help you out. And if there's something in the presentation that sparked your interest and you want to get a little more information, or you have questions, just feel free to reach out to them, and they'll get the questions over to me.
Absolutely, and it looks like, it looks like everyone's happy.
I have a question though. Good. Pamela asked the question: what did you do in irrevocable trust? And say, okay, so good question. I meant to tell you guys this. This is really important. And this is a trick that not everybody will know. Very few lawyers will even know how to do this. So you have you have this $450,000. Now it's 450. It was up originally about close to 500, and that's gone down. Now she's down to 400. We wanted to. It's not money that my mother's going to need. So, but she might need it. So we're gonna keep it segregated. So we didn't want to put it in our names. If I put it in children's names, we're gonna have to pay taxes on it, on the income. So, but if you leave it in what's called a revocable trust, which is a living trust, is a revocable trust. That's a standard thing you do, but it's a pass through. So you have this trust, but all the income comes to you. But the problem with that is that if there's ever a need, if my mom ends up in a nursing home and there's a spend down, she's concerned about this. She wants to at least protect that money from that possibility. So we have to put it in an irrevocable trust. Now the problem with an irrevocable trust, so the good news is irrevocable trust, it stops it protects the money from that Medicaid spend down if that's ever needed. But as a taxpayer, an irrevocable trust is a separate taxpayer. It gets its own tax ID number usually. Until I'll tell you as a trick I did. Again, it's something if you're interested, you can talk to an attorney about. Or if you ask me, I can give you the information and you can bring it to your own attorney. I can't be your lawyer. So, but I can help you in going to your own lawyer. So you don't want the irrevocable trust to be a taxpayer itself, because once you exceed 12,000, here's the number 12. Once you exceed around 12,000 of income in an irrevocable trust, your tax rate jumps to the highest tax rate, 39.6. I think 39.6. 30. Now I'm showing my age. It's 37 or 39.6. I forgot which one it is, but it's pretty high. So you're talking, and the state tax, you're talking about 40% tax on income, and we're talking only not even a big account. And once you 12,000 is like nothing. But that's the way your local trusts are. It's the highest tax rates. So what we did was, I created what's called a grantor trust. So there's two different general categories of trust. A grantor trust, which is where the grantor, my mom, she's the one who contributed the money to it. She granted me making the contribution to the trust, funding the trust. Where the grantor retains enough power over that trust that for tax purposes, it's still considered hers. So all the income in her current irrevocable trust actually goes back to my mom. So because we're not, this is my mom's money, and that's fine. And she should pay tax on that. She's had only losses. Okay. But at some point, hopefully she'll have taxable income coming out of that trust. And but it'll flow to her. And that's a pretty big difference. So we get the benefits of both an irrevocable trust, which is protected, but yet for tax purposes, this is sort of an anomaly in tax law. How can you do such a thing? Is it hers or not hers? So it's not hers for Medicaid purposes, but it is hers for income tax purposes. And this is one of the things that actually we talked about a couple sessions ago, where there were proposals to take away this option, go after what's called grantor trusts, because they are very useful. So once you get into that, you have to make that decision. This comes up quite often with clients. We have a certain amount of money. We want to get some protection from that money, maybe get out of the older person's name into maybe their children's name. But again, we want to also think out the tax consequences of the trust. So thank you for asking the question. I'm sorry, I meant to talk about that, but I was sort of running on time. So I sort of only mentioned it slightly, and so now you got the full answer.
Yeah, no, that was very good. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Great. Anything else? Thank you, everybody, for staying on to the end. This is a nice group, and I really hope you learned something from this. And feel free to send feedback, even negative, hopefully not so negative, but you can send negative if you want. But any feedback or any ideas you might have for future presentations, we've been doing these presentations basically twice a year. So if there's something on your mind that's great, and I can handle the financial type stuff and estate planning and trust planning. Obviously, if it's related to mission of the Worker Circle, then Anne and her team can do those things.
Yeah, sure. We're happy to hear everyone's ideas. So thank you. And thanks everyone for joining us. It's always nice to get together with our community in person and virtually. And thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, clearly this hit home for all of us. I mean, we all need to think about our
Well,
future
I-
finances.
Yeah, I think I really meant just give you ideas, just things to think about, sort of try to make some adjustments in your own situation, depending on your situation, which is unique to everybody.
Right. Well, thank you. And thanks everyone. And wishing you all a happy retirement whenever that may be. And I hope you're all having a good day and week. Take good care.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, Pamela. Be well.
Bye.
Thank you.